Hello, hello.
I'm just going to change my audio setting for you here, so it's not too awful. Yeah, this is when you come back, we're going to have some discussions here. This is the local coffee shop, just so you know. Right. One more thing.
But not it's not in Bergen.
No, I'm going to see you before Bergen. Come on. Right. Okay. I am giving you my full attention. I will mute when I'm not talking, of course.
You can hear me all right? Okay, super. So well, thanks for taking the time. The idea is basically, so I said metaverse a bit as a, let's say, provocation based on the email thread that we had for the last few days. But I'll clarify the idea being that if we imagine again a VR space, let's say with a virtual desk or desktop and our documents, whatever they might be, whatever format we might use, I would personally spend most of the time alone in there. And I don't necessarily want people to be in there, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I do want to show you stuff. I do want to show you a bit like the progress and things like this. And it's just like screen sharing, let's say in Zoom, but finding ways to basically invite somebody in. Again, most of the time not. And also when I invite would be not everything. Like when I share my screen, I hide my email or I hide things, notification, all this. So let's say 99% of things would not be shared, but the 1% that is, I think is actually very valuable, very precious. So I think not talking about the social aspects is not ideal. But the thing is, I want my stuff to remain my stuff. Like I don't want, for example, if you have your own virtual desk with your page and your content, I think it should truly be yours, meaning not hosted on my server, and that my stuff is not hosted on your server. Again, unless I explicitly say so. And one aspect that has been worked on for I don't know years is, for example, going from Twitter to Mastodon. Let's imagine that Musk really do buy Twitter and we don't agree with it anymore. We could just leave entirely and have all our little servers, or we can federate where you have your server or I have my server, or we have a shared server. But we basically do our own thing with our own set of rules and still find ways to collaborate. All this to say that the same model should, in my opinion, apply to working spaces in VR, where we still have possess everything, own everything, keep track of provenance, but still federate so that we can exchange content, share content, spaces and places in our spaces. But the federation aspect is very important, and it's funny. I use controllers to hold my phone, so not perfect. But no, yeah, and the federated aspect, I included it a little bit in an old demonstration. So let's say, technically speaking, it's not solved, but pretty much, thanks not to my work, but to a friend of mine who did initially for Mozilla Hubs. He did basically a federated aspect called Immerse. And I'll have a chat with him tomorrow afternoon to show him the space to manipulate text and code in VR. Because even though I did the technical implementation or inclusion, let's say, of his work of Immerse, of the federated aspect, I didn't do anything interesting with it. I did not cheers. I did not I'm still alone in my space, which is fine because again, it's still very exploratory. But ideally, let's say if I invite you to that space, or if you invite me to your space, we do find ways to do this properly, let's say, so that the modification you do in mine are kept and the other way around. So that's a little bit the question I have for you is, imagine you have a space like we explored a few times. Imagine it has all the like the magical interaction, the beautiful Japanese room, or anything of those that we feel is good enough, let's say, to be to the space. What would be the feature when you invite someone in, or someone else invite you in? So the purely social aspect, federated aspect, what would be the features you would truly need? Not just would be kind of cool, but that you would really want to use.
I think this is a very, very important and interesting question. And my initial gut feeling is the idea of the desk. So when you enter someone's office in real life, very often you sit on the opposite side of the desk. So if they have a private family photograph, it may face towards them and not you, and that kind of thing. I think this will be very important to experiment with. And I think obviously privileges too, like if you are family or spouse or whatever, you may have full access, but that may not be useful. But then we get into the question of the thing that I've been really looking at today is it's kind of going with this thing that I mentioned to you the other day. I find it a bit depressing that most of the time when I think of something we should have it for our book, I can, that kind of interaction could work on just a normal computer as well. So, sorry, I'm not changing. I'm not changing topic. I just wanted to show you, for instance, so you can see this, right?
Yeah.
So I've manually taken everyone's names and titles, and this kind of staggering. Of course, this would be really good in VR. And similarly, I started on this one, but it just became too much hassle. But it proves the point. We can make a huge, wide thing as well. So that was all a bit silly. So it comes down to, and this is where I'm getting back to your point, index cards. Almost everything, I think, should live on an index card because, let's say, we have a list. Okay, here, a couple of assumptions. It's been so long since I talked to you in terms of where our brains have gone. Number one, having an environment for one document is stupid because there is no such thing as one document anymore. So let's say that you are interested in my work. You would be interested in reading everything I've written, not just in one journal. So therefore, the name of the author for you would be more valuable than some other information. So we go back to the notion of bindings. I have more to say on this, but the point is, let's say you and me are sitting in a virtual room right now, and I have all these cards in front of me. I'm doing really useful things. How do I share that with you? Do we have the same text on both sides, so to speak? Do you suddenly have permission to sit next to me? Do we enlarge it to fill the whole space? I think your question there really interrupted my thinking in a good way. Over.
Yeah, it's interesting to take the perspective, let's say, of the list of participants to the event. I didn't think about it this way, but it is like a friend list of people who had a shared, at least intellectual space, not only physical because we were hybrid, but yeah, I'll think about it also this way, like what if 2 or n people from that group, the list of participants, were to share a space, what would they want to bring in that they should either new shared space for the, let's say, meeting or discussion or whatnot, or if they go to each other's space or places, what would have to come along. So that's definitely an interesting data set. And just also on the quote unquote just technical standpoint, to generate let's say 100 spaces for the participants or for all the random pairing of participants is pretty trivial. So we can imagine like a room for each of the, how do you say, chapter of the book, let's say, by each of the author of that book. Would include their own content so that they would be able to invite others in their space based on the book content.
Well, this is something that I've been worried about for almost a year now. It came up quite early. The notion of you build a knowledge product and then you go to some other room. How can you take it with you?
Yeah,
You know? And we saw the presentation where Microsoft is now doing things with Meta. So I saw your tweets. I agree. Those two near monopolies can do whatever they want. They can make this incredible. But how do we deal with it? So in my current thinking, it comes down to two things: just a visual meta, and the idea of, well, it's just funny. I think it's funny. We talked about the tabletop. Right? So that is where we used to. Another word for that is desktop. Right, the desktop thing from, the desktop kind of analogy in computing now may have a use as a different kind of things. So I'm thinking they can be so many of the cool sci-fi. They have let's say a hologram of someone singing, like for some reason, so but they come from a point. So that point could be a small desktop on the floor. It could be anywhere. But it is a point of origin that whatever it presents to the room has as a reference point. Obviously, it doesn't solve nearly half the question, but it's a starting point, maybe.
I couldn't get the last part. There is a bit more noise.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying it doesn't solve a lot having this point. But another aspect, I think, is I did actually buy a 3D model. I did actually make the room several times in Blender and in Scope. Never anything good. But one thing I thought about was having the viewport for someone else defined, so that if someone visits the room, it may just be a static camera, that's all they have, and then maybe audio is handled through Zoom completely externally. Just as I know people next to me laughing, right? People are too happy.
So it's okay. It's good for them.
Yes. So I'm saying one way to invite someone in is for them to just have a camera in the room from a specific viewpoint. It doesn't really solve your issue, but it's kind of a hack.
No, but it makes sense, and I have where was it? Yes, I had I did it actually at some point too. You can take screenshots in VR. What I haven't done is, for example, to keep in terms of provenance, that if you take a screenshot, you want the position in space, so that, for example, you have like a light or transparent version of that screenshot, so that you can go back to it eventually, also in time. But this I haven't explored yet. But that would mean, for example, if I were to go visit your space and you showed me things, then I would be able to take screenshots from the visit and then bring them back, let's say, to my space after, so that I would remember what we discussed about. And even if I don't go back to your space, I'm not like trapped outside of it, let's say, so that I can keep some version of it, again, with provenance, so that if you allow me again in your space for another conversation, then I can start from any of those screenshots or captured moments to go back right in that position. So yeah, in terms of federation, that makes perfect sense.
The notion of a screenshot is very interesting, because what's in the screenshot could obviously be a flat image. It could also be many other things. I could imagine the screenshot system having a QR code that's constantly changing in the corner. So it stores a lot of data that will be available in the future, specifically time code being one of them. So you can see when it was done. So that could be interesting. Also, when I was going mad designing the room, I looked at ambient stuff. So one of the things I was thinking about, this is an aside, is maybe you have a calendar moving along. So, beginning of the day, end of the day, you can see the dots. Because now that we have a gaze attention, it's going to be so interesting. If you stare at that thing, it gives you more information. I'm saying this now in context because maybe if you stare at something, it gives you context. You don't want someone else to have the same access. So if you happen to be looking at something private, your guest should certainly have that visible to themselves as well.
Yes. I it's a bit, I'll be honest, it's not a complaint, but it's a bit more of a jazz session than a proper discussion, because I imagine, I hope you can hear me well, but I can hear, let's say, half of the words you say. So I will, it's a, let's see if I heard the good ones, or maybe that was through luck, still interesting. First of all, the idea that a screenshot doesn't have to be 2D, that we can, of course, take the screenshot like it's done now, pixel so that when you go there and you move a bit, when you look at the screenshot you took, you see through what the scene was then. And also that made me wonder that so the scene I'm looking at, let's imagine I look in your space, and there are, again, from that viewpoint, let's imagine 5 pieces of text. One with the name of someone else who came to the symposium, 2 about the book, and another one about, let's say, a workshop in a couple of weeks or month. And then what the 3D screenshot would still allow to look at it. But what could be interesting is also to have the semantic content of it, so that we can access actually the content there. And eventually one can imagine 3D view, content there in 3D, and be able to reach in. And if, for example, you have the let's say the link to the workshop or the text of the workshop, I can pull it out, and again, thanks to provenance, and rather than having just a screenshot, bring it to my space.
I've turned up the setting for noise control. Can you hear me better now?
Not really.
So a key thing for me with the VR experience of the book is that reading a book and being in the library has to be the same thing, because you may choose to read only one article in the book and then something else. So to be able to annotate this is, of course, crucial. To be able to navigate and say, for instance, as Peter published something new. So all these different entities, that's why I'm thinking almost entirely in index cards, right? So imagine if you, excuse me, I need to sneeze. It's almost like hay fever, but of course there's no hay fever now. Right. Thank you. So imagine you are going through a list of people that you have that have either written a book, a document, or an article in a document. It will be really important for you to say who you find interesting and who you don't find interesting, of course. But also, I can imagine very easily that if you select a person, their little name entry now becomes much bigger, and you can see all their books.
This one I can't even try to guess.
Is this different? Is this horrible?
Maybe.
I'll tell you what. Do you have any iOS or Apple device? Can we use FaceTime? Because then I can be on my phone with you.
Sure. Yeah, we can try.
Okay. I give you my number. Can you email me or text me your? Okay.
I'll text 1 minute.